in, thinking!
I'm Sean Bradeseth, and I've been thinking about Christians on camera, and by that I mean Christians in the media, how they're depicted on things like TV shows and movies. I remember growing up, and you'd watch some kind of religious person being shown on a show, and it would be the vicar or the priest, but often they'd be very detached, very innocent, bumbling sort of fool, out of touch with reality, sort of off in their own corner. Well, that was interesting to see. Not a very positive depiction, but the culture has changed. And I remember the moment I first saw it. I watched a trailer for a very famous singer, and it described her childhood in this trailer for a movie that was being made about her. And it said, she was raised by fundamentalist Christians. And I thought, that sounds, you're framing it as though she was abused. And that actually was the framing. It was as though she'd come from this abusive background because she was raised by Christians who tried to live in what the Bible says. Since then, I've seen a drastic departure from depicting Christians, let's say, as just out of touch. Now Christians are depicted in movies and in TV shows as abusive, conniving, trying to hurt people. Very interesting to see a series at the moment, which I won't name because I don't think anybody who loves the Lord should try and watch it. It's actually about a post-apocalyptic world where zombies are running around. And very interesting at the moment, their latest episode they've released shows a man who leads a kind of a cult, and he begins to quote the Bible, and then he's trying to hurt people, he's trying to harm them. He's actually a wolf. Now, we should never look at that and say, well, it's not possible for a Christian to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. But the trend in Hollywood, and actually right now, a big name actor has come out and said there is an anti-Christian bias in Hollywood. And this man himself is not a Christian in the slightest. He's actually just fed up with it. So I'm seeing that happening. You know what that does when we see Christians depicted in media as being abusive, coercive, anti-science, anti-logic. When you see that depiction in the media, it begins to knock your confidence. You start to feel, well, in society, am I allowed to say that I'm a Christian? It's not societally beneficial to me anymore. People don't hold that in high esteem anymore. I want to say to you, do not let those things knock your confidence. I would say, firstly, don't watch them. That is not going to help you in the slightest. But don't let it knock your confidence. I want to encourage you to take the approach of Paul the Apostle. In Acts chapter 26, he was brought firstly before Festus, who was a governor, and he had to give an answer, a defense for the trouble he was causing by preaching the gospel. And then he appeals, and essentially while he's being held by Festus, a King Agrippa comes into town. And so Paul has to give his account of this again to King Agrippa. And I want to read from Acts chapter 26. And from verse 24. So Paul is busy talking to King Agrippa, and Festus interrupts him. Listen to this. At this point, Festus interrupted Paul's defense. "You are out of your mind, Paul," he shouted. "Your great learning is driving you insane." And this is Paul's response. Acts 26, verse 25. "I am not insane, most excellent Festus," Paul replied. "What I'm saying is true and reasonable. The king," he's talking about Agrippa now, "the king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I'm convinced that none of this has escaped his notice because it was not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do." Then Agrippa said to Paul, "Do you think that in such a short time you can persuade me to be a Christian?" Paul replied, "Short time or long, I pray to God that not only you, but all who are listening to me today may become what I am, except for these chains." Paul had it coming from every side. He had Festus, who actually was listening to him fairly reasonably and was giving him fair treatment in a sense. Suddenly, as Paul began to speak about the gospel, Festus got angry, called him insane. Paul's response was not to spin out, not go, "Oh, I wonder if maybe I'm on the wrong track here." He said, "I'm not insane. These things are reasonable. They have happened. They weren't done in a corner. It's been evident to all." And then he speaks to the king and he says, "What about you?" And Paul says, "I want you to be like I am, except for these chains." Paul knew what he believed. He understood it. He knew that it had changed his life and that it was busy changing the world. And he had confidence in it. I want to say to you, do not take in these things that are coming through the media about Christians and let it knock your confidence. It is demonic lies. There is a concerted effort to knock anything that has to do with God, to try and hit it to the ground and reduce it to nothing and elevate everything else that is against God. Pay no attention to it. Do not let it into your life, into your home. Don't sit and dwell on it. Resist it, reject it, and have confidence in this gospel that is changing people's lives.
end.